Hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's my great pleasure to introduce today's seminar speaker, Helena Kubi. She has a BS in biology, MS in zoology, MBA in agribusiness. Now he is doing a PhD at San Paulo University in applied ecology with emphasis on silvopasture. She has a very strong background in beef cattle farming. Currently, she is at University of Florida working on a sustainable livestock project. Today, she is going to talk about intensive silvopastoral systems as a sustainable alternative for beef cattle production.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the presentation. So, as I was already introduced, I am a bachelor in biology, master in zoology, and now I'm doing my PhD with applied ecology with sustainable livestock. So I have a farm background. We have a farm in the center-east, west of São Paulo state in Brazil. We do cattle beef there. And now let's talk about a little bit the situation, the global situation. So the population is growing, and we expect that it will be around 9.7 billion of people in 2050. And this will result in a higher food demand. Approximately 60% more food will be demanded in this time. And we will have to do this with less research, less water and less research sources. And also the meat demand will also grow. So you can see here from 2005 to 2050, we went to 64 million tons of meat to 106 million tons. So we will have a huge growth in the food demand in the next years. And we need to feed the world. So here we can see the biggest producers of beef and the biggest exporters of beef. And Brazil is between the biggest. The second biggest producer of meat is Brazil, and the biggest exporter of meat is Brazil. So we can see that Brazil has an important role in the mission of feed the world in the next years. So a little bit about the Brazilian beef. We have approximately 163 million of hectares of pastures in the country. We have a predominance of perennial pastures, different of what happens here in the US, that you have a lot of winter grasses and summer grasses. We have perennial grasses. So we stay with the same grasses from all the year. Our average stocking rate is 0.9 animal units per hectare. And we have 11.7% of the total herd in the world. We are the biggest herd in the world, the biggest commercial herd in the world. So the origin of Brazilian beef, almost more than 80% of our beef comes from grass feed. So our animals are predominantly fed with grass. This is more ecological compared to feedlots because we feed animals with grass. That is something that we, as humans, we cannot eat. We cannot transform grass in energy. So using animals, cows and cattle, to do this, it's a really sustainable way to produce because we don't need to plant the food for the animals. And when we do this, we need more area and more impact. So we feed animals with something that we cannot eat, and we use the animals to transform this in a highly nutritive food, that is the meat. So more than 80% of our cattle comes from grass-fed animals. So a little bit of our history and projections. So here we can see that Brazilian herd comes from 167 thousand heads in 2001 to 196,000 heads in 2021. So we can see that we have 70% of increase in the size of the herd. In the other hand, our pasture areas decrease almost 11%. So this shows us that we are being more efficient in producing beef. So we are being able to produce more with less area. In the projections, we can see that we supposedly will still growing and reducing the area, so being even more efficient. You can see this through the stocking rate. We came from 0.75 to 0.9 now, and we still improving this, and the goal is arrive to 1.03 in 2031. So a little bit about the Brazilian land use. So here in this map, we can see that the biggest area of Brazil came from native areas. So we have more than 40% of native areas, and another types of land use that come from native vegetation. So preservation areas, protect areas, and other kinds. Our major land use in Brazil are the single pastures. More than 17% of our land are pastures. And here we can see that only 1.66% are integrated used pastures. And these integration are not only agroforestry kind of integration, are not only integration with trees. Here we also have crop livestock integrations. So this is a really small number, and Brazil has a lot of potential to make this number grow in the next years. So our major land use is pasture. And here we can see in this map the distribution of the pasture areas and also the condition of these areas. So in green, we can see the pastures that has no degradation. So pastures in good conditions. On 47.7% of our pastures have a good condition. In yellow or orange, we can see the intermediary degradation. So 38% of our pastures have some level of degradation. Here in the bottom, we can see 3 pictures showing examples of a hardly degraded area, an intermediary degraded area, and a good condition pasture. And 14.3% are hardly degraded. So this shows that more than 50% of Brazilian pastures has some level of degradation. And this is really bad because degraded pastures come with environmental impacts. In degraded pastures, we cannot have a good stocking rate, so we have low productive, the soil is more exposed, so less herbage cover, and this is really bad. More erosions, more impact, and we need also more areas to produce because this comes with a low productive. So about the integrated systems in Brazil. Approximately 17 million of hectares in Brazil has integrated systems. And this represents only 80.3% of the total crop or livestock area. So this is really low. And in this 17 million, we have 4 kinds of integration. So we have crop and forest, crop and livestock, forest and livestock, and crop, forest, and livestock. So we can see that only in the forest livestock and the crop forest livestock, we have trees. So 80% of this area, this 17 millions, doesn't have trees. So we can see that we have a problem. We need to conciliate conservation with production. We have a greater food demand, the population is growing, and you have to feed these people. The conventional systems are saturated. They are highly dependent of inputs, and they are not sustainable. The deforestation and degraded areas, degraded pastures, comes with environmental impacts and are also related with animal welfare. We need to improve the animal welfare in these areas. So the challenge here is increase the productivity, reducing the environmental problems, the environmental impacts. So when we talk about sustainable livestock, we have to have in mind the 3 pillars of sustainability. We cannot work without these 3 pillars together. So we have to work with the economic pillar, the environmental pillar, and the social pillar. And since we are working with animals in livestock, we also have to have in mind the animal welfare. So 3 pillars of sustainability and animal welfare to try to solve the problem. In this context, the silvopastoral systems are a good alternative to improve the sustainability in livestock operations. They are integrated systems with trees, grass, and cattle. And the 3 components can have a lot of arrangements and objectives. So we can have trees for wood, for timber, for oil, for fruits, a lot of options. But the planning is essential. So we have to think about the trees orientation, how to manage the sun and the light, what is the objective of the trees in the system. Everything has to be really planned before we start a system like this, because it comes with a lot of challenges. We have the competition for light, for nutrients, for water. We have the predation of the trees and the management of the system. When we have more components in the system, we have to have a better management. We have to take care of more things. So it's a challenge. And also to implant the system. So a lot of times we have to come in an area that is only grass, degraded grass in a lot of times, and turns this area in a silvopastoral system. So we have to plant trees, take care of the trees and everything else. So this is a challenge that we have to do to have a silvopastoral system. And the benefits of the silvopastoral systems are major three groups. The first one is the animal welfare, the ecosystem service, and the economic benefits. I will talk a little bit of each of them. So animal welfare. The major thing in silvopastoral systems and animal welfare is the thermal comfort. So the animals has to have a good temperature, a temperature that they can do to maintain these activities, to grow, to get fed, and everything else. Otherwise, they can have health issues, they won't gain weight, they will try to hide from the sun, and all this is bad for the production. Also, the silvopastoral systems help with the protection against predators. Even if there's no real predators in the area, the cattle is a natural prey. So it feels safer in a place that they can hide, even if the predator is not there. It's more stressful for the animal if it feels safe in the environment. And also the environmental quality. So the trees can bring the better shadow quality. So it's not only protect from the sun, but also keep the microclimate better, and all the environment is better in this area. So it's important to have in mind that when we talk about animal welfare, we are, of course, dealing with ethical concern about the animals, but also dealing with productive, because animals with welfare produce more. So here we can see a little bit of the effect of a silvopastoral system, a thermal comfort in the animals. So in this first table here, we can see this table shows the minutes per day that the animals spend in each activity. So here we can see that in silvopastoral systems, they spend 572 minutes per day grazing, while in the monocultive systems, they spend only 288 minutes grazing. So this is a huge difference. If the animal is grazing, he's eating, and also he's growing, getting fed, or whatever is the objective of the animal. They spend a lot of time resting in monocultive systems because they are trying to hide themselves from the sun, from the heat. And on the other hand, in silvopastoral systems, they rest less. They spend more time grazing and eating and everything else. And also they spend less time walking in comparison of monocultive, because they don't have to walk to hide from the shadow. They can stay in the shadow in the whole system, the whole area. And here in the other table, we can see the intake, the dry matter intake, the organic matter intake, and the water intake. So here we can see that the intake is bigger in the silvopastoral systems because the animals are grazing for a longer time. And also here it's really interesting that we can see that the water footprint is better in silvopastoral systems. They need to drink less water. Here in silvopastoral systems, they eat 82 liters of water. In the other system, they eat 238 liters of water. So this is a huge difference. And on the other hand, the feed water intake, that is the water inside the grass, inside the feed, is bigger in silvopastoral systems because the grass there has more moisture. So the ecosystem services in a silvopastoral system: the microclimate regulation, erosion control, soil decompaction and water infiltration, litter accumulation that improve the microbiote's activity. So this brings a better nutrient cycle, a bigger carbon sequestration and accumulation, a greater biodiversity that brings more pollinators, and also natural prey control. As we can see, some studies showing that in silvopastoral systems, we have a bigger incidence of dung bees that helps to decompose the feces of the animals faster, and so we have a less incidence of flies that are a serious problem for the cattle, especially in tropical areas. And the economic benefits, we increase the animal production through the welfare and the better herbage production. We decrease the need of inputs, so the system is more stable and is more sustainable, so we need to put less inputs to make it productive. And we diversify the source of income. So we have lower costs, greater profitability, and less risks, because we have more sources of incomes in the farm. So this is a little sentence about the silvopastoral systems. So the presence of trees provide to wildlife fodder, shade, and shelter, and also for livestock. It brings another source of incomes to the farmer, can be timber, fruits, food, resins, and other things. It brings soil discompaction, water infiltration, and little accumulation to the soil. Helps with the carbon sequestration and also to the microclimate regulation. The pastures feed the animals and also help with the roots and the decompaction, water infiltration. The nutrients that the soil, a better soil, provides helps the trees and also the pastures. So it's a really good cycle that happens when we put trees in the systems. And now a little bit about intensive silvopastoral systems. There are a type of silvopastoral systems, but here we have fodder shrubs planted in high density, so from 4 to 40,000 per hectare, with the trees, highly productive pastures, and the cattle. So here we can, with this kind of systems, we can increase the benefits because we have more diversity of plants in the system, so more soil discompaction, more litter accumulation, more from all the benefits, but we also have more challenge because there is no free lunch. So we have more plants, we have more things to manage and everything else. So the challenge also increase. And in this case, another challenge is to manage the cycle of the shrubs with the cycle of the pasture. So this is a challenge, and you have to find a way to manage this. So in Brazil, especially, I think in a lot of tropical areas, we have a problem with pasture seasonality. So here in these graphics, we can see the green light is the forage accumulation, the herbage accumulation, and the blue bars are the rain. So we can see that they are really related. In the month with rain, we have a bigger forage accumulation. And here in this other graph, it's the same thing. The bars are the forage accumulation. Here we have the rainy season, and here the dry season. So in this graph, we can see that more than 70% of the dry matter production occurs during the rainy season. So we have a problem. In this bigger graph, you can see this black line is the herbage production. So we have a big herbage production during the rainy season, and a lower herbage production during the dry season. And also we have a lower quality from the forage. So we have less forage with less quality. And here, this line is the animal demand. We can see that it's constant during all the year. And here we have a problem because we have less herbage with less quality, but the animals are still eating. So you need to do something to feed the animals here. And this is really a big problem in Brazil, especially in the place that I live, because we have a really dry season. So the idea here is with intensive silvopastoral systems, we can try to decrease this problem. So here, the presence of trees probably will help this seasonality of the grass be a little more stable. So we have less lower difference between the stations. So since the microclimate will be a little better, the water in the soil will be a little better, probably the grass won't be so bad during the dry season. So this curve here will be a little more soft, and also we will have the shrimps to feed animals during this season, during the whole year, of course, but to help to solve the problem here. Because shrimps have a deeper root and they are more stable during the year, so they don't have this so intense curve here as grasses has. So with trees and shrimps, we might be able to solve the problem of pasture seasonality in Brazil. So here are some pictures to show examples of intensive silvopastoral systems. In these two pictures, we have the cattle with the pasture, with grass, and leucena. It's a shrimp, a legume shrimp that is highly known to animal nutrition. And these two, we have intensive silvopastoral systems with Tithonia diversifolia. So we can see the shrimps here, the animals are eating the grass, and also the shrimp. Here we have clearly the grass in the front of the animal, the shrimps in the back, and the trees. So these are examples of intensive silvopastoral systems. So I will show now some tables with the potential of intensification that this kind of systems can bring. So here in this paper, the author compares conventional systems, single grass systems, with intensive silvopastoral systems in 3 countries, Australia, Mexico, and Colombia. So here we can see that the stocking rate really increased. Here it's the double, here is more the double in Mexico, and in Colombia it's a little more diverse, but also a big increase in the stocking rate. So with this kind of systems, we can put more animals in the same area. And when we see the average daily gain here, the live weight gain here in the case, we can see that it also increased a lot. So we have the double, and this is the gain per animals, it's not the gain per area. So we can see that the systems allowed us to have a higher stocking rate, and also a better daily gain. So this reflects in a much bigger production, because we have more animals gain more weight in the same area. So the meat production per kilos of meat production per hectare per year, it's completely different in both systems. So in Australia, for example, we come from 225 to 910. This is a huge difference. And if we can produce more meat in the same area with sustainability, with trees and a higher diversity, we have a really sustainable system, because we are improving the environment, we are bringing animal welfare, we are giving more money to the producer because he's producing more in the same area. So it's a huge potential to solve, or to help to solve, the problem of sustainable livestock production. Here we have another table. This table is in Spanish because the work was in Spanish, but you can see here the number of hectares. So both, he compares a pasture without fertilization, a single pasture without fertilization here, with an intensive silvopastoral system here. So in the first line, the number of hectares, both has the same size, 20 hectares each. The animals in production. So here we have 2 animals, and in the intensive silvopastoral systems, 4 animals. Here the weight that the animal will be sold is the same, 450 for each. The animals in production, since we have 2 animals per hectare and 20 hectares, we have 40 animals here and 80 animals here. And here, the initial weight and the final weight are the same to make it comparable. So here we can see the big difference. The average daily gain in the single pasture is 0.45, while in the intensive silvopastoral systems is 0.75. And in consequence of this, we have a shorter cycle. So here they spend 533 days to finish the animal, while here they spend 320 days. So it's a huge difference in the cycle. So we can produce more in less time. This is also better for the producer. So you can have more animals running faster. Another work showing not only the intensification potential, but also the methane emissions in the systems. So here we have the first one is a single pasture, an extensive pasture. His is an intensive pasture, so it's an improved pasture. And here, intensive silvopastoral systems. So the first line is the stocking rate, 0.5 in the extensive pasture, 1 in the intensive pasture, and 3 in the silvopastoral system. And again, the big difference is not only the stocking rate, but also the average daily gain, the gain per hectare, and the days of the cycle. So this is the huge difference again. More animals producing more in less time. This is really a sustainable alternative. Here in this line, you can see the emissions of methane per hectare, per ton of meat produced. So here we have 229 in the extensive pasture, 208 in the intensive pasture, and 127 in the intensive silvopastoral systems. So the emission per ton of meat production is really lower in the intensive silvopastoral system. And also the hectares needed to produce a ton of meat. So we have 14, almost 15 hectares to extensive pasture, 5.5 hectares for produce 1 ton of meat in an intensive pasture, and 1.2 hectares to produce 1 ton of meat in a intensive silvopastoral system. And here again, from the same work, the emissions in these 3 kind of systems. So the same systems that we are seeing in the previous table. So here we have kilos of meat producer per hectare year. So in the extensive pasture, 6-7 kilos of meat. In the intensive pasture, 182 kilos of meat, and the intensive silvopastoral, 821 kilos of meat per hectare year. So this is a huge improvement in the productive. And then here they put the emissions, the total methane emissions. Here the methane, the carbon capture in the soil, and the carbon capture through the trees and shrubs. So here we can see that the extensive system has no carbon sequestrated in the soil. The intensive pasture, the 38,000 of tons of carbon equivalent, and the silvopastoral system 11,000. But the intensive silvopastoral system also have the capture through the plants, the trees and shrubs, that is 18 tons of carbon. So when we see the balance between all the methane emitted and sequestered by the system, we can see that both the single pastures, the intensive and the extensive silvopasture, has a negative balance. They emit more methane than they captured. On the other hand, the intensive silvopastoral systems has a positive balance. So we can sequestrate, we can capture more methane, more carbon equivalent than we emit in the systems. So now a little bit about my PhD project. So the title is Intensive Silvopastoral System as a Sustainable Alternative for Beef Cattle Production in Brazil. So the idea of the project is compare the 2 systems, the intensive silvopastoral systems and a single pasture. So our hypotheses are basically the use of the system, the intensive silvopastoral systems will bring better animal performance, greater support, and better productive. The change in the land use will bring beneficial changes in the system, better environmental quality and more ecosystem services. And the intensive silvopastoral systems will bring a better profitability to the producers and a financial return. So we will work with 2 blocks with 2 treatments each. We will have 2 periods, year 1 and year 2, and we will work with rotational grazing, with 7 days of grazing and 35 days of free growth. And the methodology of put and take to keep the herbal allowance constant during the year and between the treatments. So here is the study area. It's inside the farm in center west of São Paulo state. Here in this map, we can see the different topology in the area. So we set the blocks in a position that both treatments will have both treatments in the higher area and in the lower area. So we can compare and have similarity between them. So here our two blocks. So here's block 1, here's block 2. We have 4 experiment units. So conventional 1, intensive silvopastoral 1 in the block 1, conventional 2, and intensive silvopastoral system 2. So the total area is 12 hectares. Each experimental unit has 3 hectares, and each paddock, that each experimental unit is divided in 6 paddocks. So each paddock has 0.5 hectares. So here the animal will stay 7 days, and then he will pass to the other one. And the total cycle, the time to the animal starts here and finishing this one, will be 42 days. Here is a side view of one paddock. So we have the trees, the eucalyptus trees, each 25 meters. So 25 meters between lines of trees and 4 meters between trees. And in each paddock, the red lines are the fences of the paddock. So in each paddock, we have a strip of Titonias, the shrubs, close to the fence with 4 lines in each. Each line has 2 meters between them. So the other red line here, it's a mobile fence. The idea of this is in case the Titonia, the shrubs, cannot handle the same cycle, the same days of resting that the grass can handle, we can protect one side and keep the animals always with access to grass and to shrubs in the area. So the species that we use, the grass are Brachiaria brisanta, a really known species in Brazil. The shrubs, we are using Titonia diversifolia, known as Mexican sunflower, and the trees are Eucalyptus urograntis. So Eucalyptus urograntis is a well-known and widely used species in Brazil. It has a fast growing, as you can see in the pictures, and they can be used for furniture and biomass that brings a better return to the producer in comparison of cellulose, for example. And it has a good adaptability. So here in this first picture is the tree, the little trees when we planted in August of 19. 1 year and 2 months later in November of 20. And 1 more year in September of 21. These 2 pictures are the same tree. So we can see how much they grow in less than 1 year. And this picture here is the same tree in August of 22. You can see how big the trees are now. So the Titonia diversifolia, that is the folder shrub that we are using in the system. It has also a fast growing and a regrowth, has a good adaptability to different soils and climate conditions, a high nutritive value. The leaves can have more than 20% of protein, high biomass production, and a good root mass, and also potential to phosphorus accumulation in the soil. This species is really, it's used a lot in Colombia and Mexico, especially for dairy farms in familiar areas. So to got the Titonias to build the experimental area, we have to find and cut them because they are not a commercial plant. So I couldn't go to a place and buy seeds or plants of Titonia to plant. So we had to find them in the area surrounding my city. We were able to find when they are with the flowers because they're big and really easy to identify the flowers. So we cut. A little detail, we need 8,000 of plants to build the experiment. So we found the trees, we cut them, we did this with the truck 6 times. We bring to a greenhouse where they put the trees, the sticks in the little containers to grow the plants in the greenhouse. So we could plant them in the rain season, in the end of 21. So here we can see the plants when we planted in December of 21. They were more or less this size. Here, 40 days later, we can see how much they grow and the amount of leaves they can produce in a small period of time. And here in the bigger photo, 90 days later. So the trees were already big and full of leaves. The experimental area now is like this. Here we can see the strips of Tithonia, the trees, the lines of trees. And here we can see the size of the plants. So we have the eucalyptus trees here and the Tithonia diversifolia in the bottom. So the variables that we will analyze in the system, in the project, the animal performance, the average daily gain and the stocking rate, the herbage production, the herbage mass, growth, productive allowance and nutritive value, the environmental variables, soil, temperature and humidity, and the economic viability. And some preliminary conclusions with all that we did until now. So we can see that intensive silvopastoral systems are a potential alternative to sustainable livestock and also to recuperation of degraded areas in Brazil. Brazil is a tropical country. We need trees, and our lands can support a greater biomass and productive, herbage productive than monocultive systems. So we are able to have more plants in the areas. We are a forest country, and this can reflect in the production. We can bring to the producers more productivity. We can also see by all that we experience in the process to plant the area and everything else, that Tithonia diversifolia has a great potential. It really grows fast and regrows even faster. So shows a great potential to be used in this kind of systems. And also more studies are necessary, especially to solve the challenge that we have to implant a system and to discover how can we scale up this kind of systems and make it useful to producers so it can really be used in the real life. So my acknowledgements to my university in Brazil, to CAPES that pays my scholarship, to the farm where I'm doing my work, and also it's the farm of my family, to my crazy friends that helped me to cut Tithonias, the people from UF that is receiving me as a research scholar, and to University of Missouri for the opportunity to talk here.